In Understanding Media, Marshall McLuhan states that the biggest evolutions in media are often the combination of some two mediums. A good example of this is the combination of film with sound to make movies. A significant evolution has occurred for musical mediums within the last 30 years, the invention of the streaming service. Streaming services take music, a medium in itself, and combines it with the medium of the internet. With such a large evolution, it follows that the content will have an analogously significant shift. This is what I aim to examine. I will be uncovering this evolution and its effects through the examination of three phenomena. First, the changes that streaming services have introduced, then the effects of those changes, and lastly, how those effects manifest in music. Following this, I will apply McLuhan's categories of hot and cold to streaming services as they compare to older musical mediums. Streaming services have introduced two major innovations to the consumption of music. First, the ability to interact with single songs, and secondly, the ability to listen to endless, unique music. What matters to us is the effect of these two innovations. The mediums of a concert, an album, or the radio subjected listeners to merely choices of sets to pick from. There were only options of collections of songs. Every one song was packaged with some other many songs. Now, one is able to create their own sets through the construction of playlists, in which one can take some two entirely different songs from entirely different centuries and place them one after the other. Restrictions of genre or of appealing to the widest audience that you might see in the radio medium is dissolved, and what rises out of the puddle is the subjective album made by many listeners. All this is only possible through the ability to interact with single songs, which was never possible before the birth of the streaming service. The effect is an emphasis on each individual song played. For the songs in a user-created playlist weren't designed to be played with each other, and thus don't form any continuous coherent connection the way an album might. Instead, playlists are often collections of favorite songs or individual songs that fit a certain mood. The result of this effect of emphasis is that singles are of higher and higher importance for the artist. This phenomenon was covered in a Rolling Stone article published 3 years ago, where they cover the increasing trend of releasing more and more singles before an album release. The author argues that singles are important primers for albums by pointing out Justin Timberlake's failure to put out one really good single before the release of his album, Man of the Woods, and contrast it to Camila Cabello's successful single, Havana. This is where I think the article lacks understanding of the new medium and the reasons why artists do release singles before an album release. They do not understand that albums aimed at commercial success are only vehicles for hit singles that fit into people's playlists. This is why Timberlake's album was unsuccessful, while Cabello soared, because there were no hits on Man of the Woods. We can see this emphasis effect in another medium, TikTok, where only a snippet of a song is enough to get a song recognized and soaring in stream plays without any album vehicle. Take Curtis Waters' song Stunnin' as a simple example of this kind of unlikely success. The process of priming an album with singles is shrunk down. Instead, a single is now able to be effectively primed with just a snippet. This idea is put into practice in the TikTok dance trend, Tootsie Slide, for Drake's single of the same name. A song made to be a dance trend on TikTok, starting with its unofficial release on an Instagram livestream on the dance artist Thesis account, whom at the same time of the leak introduced a dance to go along with the song, later titled the Thesis Slide. In an NPR interview with Billboard's hip-hop editor Carl Lamarre, it is stated, quote, "TikTok challenges tend to be fan-created after the song's release. What Lamarre says makes this new number one different is that the accompanying challenge was premeditated by the artist himself to ensure social media virality. Thesis Slide premiered at the top of the Billboard charts and became the fastest growing trend on TikTok. Through this example and the example of Curtis Waters' Stunnin', we can identify time and energy spent on efforts for the success of singles rather than albums. In the past, the closest thing one had to an endless stream of music was the radio. But because of the finances of the radio industry, the music played was often popular and label signed. The consequence of this was that the discovery of music was limited to more physical mediums, like underground venues. Streaming services now allow constant new discovery, as anyone and everyone is able to upload and find new music on these apps, creating a much more accessible avenue for artists. But the premiere of decentralized music upload, along with the ability to endlessly discover new music that streaming services have introduced, favors a distinct kind of listening, a listening that is almost entirely passive. I call this listening sensational listening, also known simply as background listening. Someone who is sensationally listening is not paying close attention to the playlist as a unit, the way one may with older sets like albums. How could one be expected to pay close attention to a playlist when it in fact never ends? Instead, this kind of listening is meant only to occupy your senses without the disruption of repetition. One may ask, what could someone get out of simply having their senses occupied? As McLuhan sees it, specialized irritation causes general numbness. McLuhan puts it so in Understanding Media, quote, "The selection of a single sense for intense stimulus is in part the reason for the numbing effect that technology as such has on its makers and users. For the central nervous system rallies a response of general numbness to the challenge of specialized irritation. This utilization of music to numb one's own senses is made even more consuming as one strips back further restriction with the mobility of music. Just as repetition is eliminated and thus eliminates a form of disruption, so is the restriction of space eliminated, and with it, a form of disruption." We are able to see this numbing utility in the popularity of more passive looping music. Take lo-fi as an example. It is no secret that genres like lo-fi became popular in the mainstream primarily through streaming services like SoundCloud or YouTube live streams that are packaged with titles like study beats or beats to do homework to, engaging your ears and numbing you for long, grueling tasks. This same numbing purpose through stimulation of the ear is seen in a perhaps better example of a genre that found its popularity through streaming services: hyperpop, a genre characterized by speed and volume, whose shortness of songs are often the result of creating as much stimulation in as short a space of time, almost like a shell shock or a short burst of energy. On the opposite end of the spectrum, there is a predictable pattern that follows the virality of any song in which a 10-hour loop of it will be uploaded on YouTube. This is often done by fans or channels that are dedicated to 10-hour loop content. But a notable exception to this is the YouTuber Tobuscus, who started re-uploading his own viral songs in 2012 onto his own YouTube channels as 10-hour versions. Although this kind of video requires minimum effort to create, the fact that any significant content creator was uploading these kind of videos shows us that this kind of pattern gathered enough views to merit the calculated investment of a content creator. We can see precursors to these types of genres and the desire for sensational listening in the genre of ambient music. Although this genre entered the mainstream at a point predating modern streaming services, its content has been present in certain highly popular permutations that highlight a favoring of a peculiar form of ambience under the reign of the new medium. Some of these offshoots of ambient music are things like ASMR or rain ambient audio. These kind of videos obtained huge popularity on YouTube, with channels dedicated strictly to ASMR getting millions of subscribers and videos amassing hundreds of millions of views. Weather ambience videos are often packaged with similar subtitles to lo-fi live streams, like, quote, heavy rain for sleeping or studying, or rain sounds to relax or reduce stress. In the creation of new genres like lo-fi and hyperpop, along with the popularity of general ambience audio, we can identify that sensational listening has become a lot more popular among the modern music consumers. Coolness of media is defined by the amount of participation by the viewer's interaction with the medium. This term and the definition McLuhan gives it denotes some kind of clear binary, but it is really more useful as a relative term that we can use to compare mediums. If we compare streaming services to some of the older forms of music mediums, we can see that streaming services are much cooler. This is because of the interactive nature of its overarching medium, the internet. In Jude Marat's essay published in Ortus Journal, he states that, quote, the internet is unlike any form of mass media before it, in the sense that we don't consume it, rather we engage with it. It is this interactivity that the internet enables for the typical user that creates a cool experience for streaming services. One can create their own album, select and create new radio stations. The tools of the streaming service not only give power to the listener, but encourage that the listener interact with the service. For example, these interactions become necessary for directing algorithms, arguably the most important part of any streaming service. This is in contrast to the hotness of radio, where a listener depends on the DJ for their experience, and is only able to turn on and off the radio, switch channels, and adjust volumes. This creates an experience that is stagnant and closed off for the listener. Music has been transformed into something that is so decentralized. The listener and the DJ are not separate, but one in the same person. Other older mediums of music compare to the streaming service in the same way, hotter in their lack of decentralization, rigid in their lack of internet evolution. One may be tempted to make a sweeping claim about modern tech with some nostalgic bent about its ruining of music, but this sentiment contains a little substance. The change that we are going through is going to affect new content, whether we like it or not, so it's best if we know what is happening to us, so that we may take some control and not get caught in the river of media effect. We can achieve this clarity through application of some of McLuhan's important ideas on media and mediums. So my advice is to pay attention to the trends and new forms in media, and think about how they relate to the ways they are being communicated. That way, you will learn what those mediums really do to you. and everyone else. And remember, mediums matter.